We're starting on Daf Kuf Chav Beis Amud Aleph, and it's the Shir of Tezayin Elul. Kuf Chav Beis Amud Aleph, the Shir of Tezayin Elul. As I explained to you, on Sunday we learned two shiurim. We learned the Shir Vidal and Tezvav Elul. We learned the first keta of the Igeres HaKedesh Tezvav. And this is an Igeres HaKedesh. I'm not sure exactly to whom this was written, or if it was actually written to anybody. It was stam written by Malton Rebbe. But it's a beer on the Esesfiris. It's an explanation of the Esesfiris. So the first thing the Alter Rebbe does in the beginning of the explanation of the Esesfiris is he introduces us to the idea of V'nechi Afa V'Efer. And he explains what's the Pshat V'nechi Afa V'Efer. The Pshat V'nechi Afa V'Efer is that even though you're using a mashal of a person to explain Esesfiris based on the principle of Mipsari Yachse Elaka, Iman Nesham Mechayis Aguf, Kachas Mechayis Elam, and so on, you should understand that any mashal is only a mashal. In other words, we're going to give a mashal from a person to explain as a sphere of Datzilis, but remember that the mashal is very far away from the nimshal. Now, before we start the pnim, I want to make you two short hakdamas. The first hakdama is that when the Alter Rebbe explains the Esesfiris, he doesn't start from the top. He starts from the midas. And after he explains to the midas, he explains to the Chabad. Why? I'm sure there's many as Beidim. Oh, but this is the Metzias. Alter Rebbe explains to you the 6 midas, and the 6 midas correspond to the Esesfiris of Atzilus, to the 6 midas of Atzilus. And after he explains to you the midas, he goes back and explains Moichet. That's number one. And the second Akdama is that the Alter Rebbe explains the Esesfiris twice. The Kuf Chav Beis and almost all of Kuf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph is the first explanation of the Esesfiris. And the Shir, he says, of Chai Elul, from the Kuf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph at the bottom till the end of the Pedic, Alter Rebbe explains it again. Mamish the same thing a second time. The reason the Alter Rebbe repeats it 2 times is because the first time he explained the Esesfiris as they exist in the Nefesh HaSichlis and the Nefesh HaBamas. The second time he repeats more or less the same thing, but now he explains how it is in the Nefesh HaLakis. And it is very interesting that the Alter Rebbe repeats it twice. And if a person has a lot of time in a Chush and Iyun, to see all the differences between how the Alter Rebbe is masber each midah as it is in the Nefesh HaSichlis and how it is in the Nefesh HaLakis, because everything is betachas adiyuk. But versteht sich, we're going to learn it on a pashta level. We're not going to sit here and go into the nishgriblen. We have a half an hour to learn Tanya. So we're going to begin from the new paragraph on Daf Tezayin Amud Aleph. So the Rebbe is going to explain now the Esesfiris using the mashal of a person, but he's going to start first with the midas and then he's going to go to Moichet. V'hinei. Let's explain the test spheres as they exist in the neshama of a person. Neida lakel, it's known, or b'derach klal. Sha'amidas nechlokes b'derach klal azayamidas. The midas in general are 7. Of course, there's a lot more than 7 emotions. There's hundreds and hundreds of different words to describe emotions. And b'klolos there's 7. And if you will, even more b'klolos, it's 2 times 3 plus 1. There's a right, left, and a center of Midas Ikriyas, and his right, left, and the center of Midas Chitzenius, you'll see soon. And then there's Malchus, which the Alter Rebbe B'chal doesn't even explain in the first time, only in the second time. In the Nefesh HaLakis, the Alter Rebbe explains Malchus. In the Nefesh HaSichlis, B'chal doesn't explain it. So Zayim Midas is actually 3 plus 3 plus 1. Chagas, Nehi, and then Malchus. Zog the Rebbe B'chal Prati HaMidas Sheba Adam. In every individual midah that a human being may have, boys may achas mezayim tzela comes from one of these 7 midas. Shehein, because these 7 midas are shadish, are a root of kol midas and all the various emotions that a human being can exist, and them in general. Shehein, now the Alter Rebbe specifies, the first midah is midas hachesed, midah of chesed, and the Rebbe says zeh poshet. What's midas hachesed? Lashpia bligavol, to give without a limit. And of course, the vart of midas hachesed is not that you give infinitely. You give with 0 cheshbon. Chesed, you ask, he gives. That's all. Kindness has no. It says in Chassidus that kindness is called weak. Zecheir of nimshach harecha kamayim. Ava kamayim. It's weak. There's a lot of expressions to this weakness, and one of the weaknesses you ask, he gives. There's no cheshbon whatsoever. The noch weiter midas hagavura, midas gavura is verkehrt. Litzamtzim milashpia kol kach, to contract a limit, not to give so much. Oi, shalei lashpia kol ikir klal, not to give it all. So Gevura is the opposite. And of course, in Pnimius, Chesed gives unconditionally because Chesed just wants to give. Gevura doesn't give, not because Gevura is bad. Gevura is not Ra. Gevura is Emes. Emes means you can only get what you deserve. But this is not an Emes of Seichel, it's Emes of Regesh. When you feel in your heart that Mitzat Midas Emes, this person doesn't deserve, you don't give. And of course, in other Maimorei Chasidus, it says Faket. When Gevura makes the decision that the person does deserve, then Gevura gives God B'Takbeidus. Gevura is not cheap. Gevura says, do you deserve? Chesed doesn't ask any question. So it gives, but it gives from weakness. Gevura, when it decides you don't deserve, doesn't give you anything. But when it decides that you deserve, it gives you anashir. But here the Alter Rebbe says, Pashat Gevura is holding back. When there's mamshach. The third meat, of course, is compassion, rachamim, which is lerachem, to have rachmanis, al mishashayin, shayach, lachan rachmanis alav. It's to have compassion for a person on whom it's appropriate to use the denotation of rachmanis, of compassion. It's an in-between midah, bein gevura lechesed, in between strength and kindness. Shehu, and rachmanis is la'ashpia lachol, to give everybody. I'm sorry, that chesed is. Shehu, the chesed is. La'ashpia lachol, to give everybody. Gam lemishe le'shayach lashon rachmanis. Even a person doesn't deserve the denotation of rachmanis. Klal, mipnei she'ein nechasa klum, because he doesn't miss anything. And he's not in any pain. So chesed gives even to a rich person. Gevura only gives with a tzimtzum. Rachamim gives even to a person who doesn't deserve, but on whom you could say the lashon rachman. Say lashon rachman. Okay, and in Chassidus, rachamim is called emes la'amite. Emes la'amite means a person is in need. So chesed gives the person on a cheshbon, even if you're not in need. Gevura starts to judge. Do you deserve it? Do you not deserve it? Is it your fault? It's not your fault. Rachamim says it may be your fault that you're a loser. Maybe your own batlanis, your own mistakes. It's after all the rachmanis. You are impoverished. You're on the street because of your own stupid mistakes, your own arrogance, your own baltaiva and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that rachmanis. So Rachamim gives not because he doesn't feel that the person is wrong. That's chesed. He feels that the person doesn't deserve, but because it's a rachmanis, he gives. And it's called a memutza between chesed and gevura. It's called gevura because he knows that the person did something wrong. And it's called chesed because he's giving anyway. And Alter Rebbe says, Lefishi midah memutzas, because it's an in-between midah. Nikras teferes, it's called teferes, because the translation of the word teferes is beauty. Kamei big day teferes adarach mashal, just like garments that are beautiful. Shu beget savua begavnim harbe. It's only when it's an outfit covered with various colors, muravim by mixed into it. Bederech shu teferes v'nei, in a way that is beautiful and attractive. So teferes represents this idea of rachamim, which is beauty because it includes different things. Chesed and gevura. Mashenkin beged that's savua begavinecha, as opposed to a garment which is colored only with one garment. Zag der Rebbe leishayach beilashon teferes. You can't call it beautiful. Right? A red garment is not beautiful. A blue garment is not beautiful. A green garment is not beautiful. A yellow garment is not beautiful. When you bring the different colors together, there's beauty. Now, if red is not beautiful, how by adding yellow is beautiful? And the Teretz says the beauty is not in the red, the beauty is not in the yellow. The beauty is in the shiluf, in the way you put it together. The way you mix the different colors together, and the symmetry, and the order, and so forth. The beauty comes, what's called in fancy terms, the convergence. Convergence means every color by itself is plain. The mixing together brings out something which is more than each individual color. That's called yoifi. And Chassidus explains, God Tif, that teferes is a midah that has a lakus, which is much higher, because it's able to bring together different things. So the teferes is not in the color, it's not in the various colors, it's in the mix of the different colors. Al derech zeh, teferes is rachamim, it's the mixture of chesed and gevura. These are called primary midas. Primary midas means the midas that you use when you react. You see a person is hungry, chesed gives even if they're not hungry. Gevura may not give even if the person is hungry if they don't deserve it. And rachamim gives because they're rachmanis. So the three midas chesed, gevura, teferes are your emotional responses to situations. You learn something, you read something, you hear something, you see something, and you react. Now there's another set of three, which is called netzach heid and yesed. Netzach heid is not just three more emotions, they're different types of emotions. Because nehi is not how you react to a situation. Nihi is how you get something done in spite of obstacles. Netzach Chayid Yisai is not how you feel about it. Netzach Chayid Yisai means I want to do it, and I have obstacles. Netzach Chayid Yisai give me the strength to carry it through. The Rebbe's Mamshach. And later on, when the flow has to come into actuality. I know this means at the time you're actually giving. So even though you had rachmanas on this person, you feel chesed towards this person, so therefore you want to give the person. But when you're giving the person the pay, your second line from the bottom of the page, you have to evaluate, you have to think it over, how to give, in such a way that the recipient should be able to give him what you're giving them. This is already, even that's a chayd yisayid. It's not I feel bad for you. I've already decided I want to give you. Now I have to figure out how to give. This is called that's a chayd yisayid. Again, for example, a person wishes to communicate an idea of intelligence. To teach it to his son. Look at that. If you're going to tell your son or your student everything that you understand it, the way you understand it, the son will not be able to understand because he won't be able to get it. And therefore, even though you're so smart and you know so much, when you're teaching your son, you have to organize your thoughts in a different way. In a different order, in a different idea. Each thing has to be discussed separately, a little bit at a time, so the kid can get it. You start from the bottom, tomorrow you teach him a little more, and tomorrow after that you teach him a little more, until the child grows up. So Netzach Heid and Yisayid is the technique that's used, not the emotions that I want to be mashpia, but how I'm going to be mashpia. But his mamshich, or Bechinas Eitzazu, this concept of calculation is Nikras Netzach V'Heid, is the two meters Netzach V'Heid. Because Netzach V'Heid is in Kloyas Yetzes, go on the kidneys, the kidneys are a source of Eitza. Eitza means planning, right? You have Tam V'Seichel and Tam V'Eitza. Seichel is intellect, understanding. Eitza means planning how to get something done. So the Rebbe says Eitza is in the He. V'gam, in addition to being the Kloyas Yetzes, the zera, which comes from Yesed, is prepared in Netzach V'Heid. That although the tipas hatchad, a child, a pikabola, a pitede, comes from a tipas hatchad, a point, a pintele, a nekude, it comes from the father, and the makavid is in the mayach, it says Tanya Perik Beis, but it has to come down into Agshoma, and it passes through the Bayim, and the Bayim are the Netzach and Heid that are mavashal the zera. It shouldn't be ruchnius, it should be gashmius. Which means an idea of wisdom, which comes from the seichel of the father. It shouldn't come down in its most edel of form as the father himself understands it. It should change a little bit from the edelkeit of the mind of this child, of the father. And to produce an idea, a form of wisdom, which is not so edel, that the son should be able to get it in his mind and his understanding. Says the Alter Rebbe, it's mamish the same idea, like the physical tipa. The it comes from the father's brain, and when it comes from the father's brain, it's ruchnius. According to Chassidus, it's called the hashpah atzmis. In the tipa, you have the whole atzmis of the father. Shidaka me'ed, it's very, very edel. And then v'nasa gasa v'chumnitz, it becomes coarse and it becomes physical. Mamish b'kloyes utrein bein, in the kloyes and the trein bein. So just like begashmi, something comes from the moyach, in order to come down, has to become tipa gashmi through the kloyes yetzes. The same as the whole idea of netzach and hoid. Netzach and hoid are emotions that plan about how to connect to a makabel. This is the first thing. And now the Alter Rebbe says v'gam. In addition to netzach and hoid being the idea that they plan how to bring something down from a higher level to a lower level. Netzach v'heid nikroim shchokim v'rechayim. They're called shchokim. Shchokim is the name of one of the seventh heavens, as you had in Shara Yichud Amunah, Perikid Beis, from the Gemara Masat Chagiga. V'rechayim means a mill, a grinder. The Gemara says, Sheshechik man tzadikim, that they grind man for tzadikim. The Gemara says that there's seven heavens. There's seven heavens, and the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention all of them, but in Shara Yichud Amunah Perikid Beis, he mentions a couple of them. There's there's what are they called? Moin, and there's Zvul, and there's Shchokim. If you look on page Tesla Beis in the Tanya, you have Shchokim, and you have Zvul, and you have Mochain. He lists some of the 7 heavens. And the Gemara says, B'diak, what each one of these heavens does. So the Rebbe says the heaven, which is called Shchokim, is even a Chayim. That Sheichak is Mana, it grinds the man for tzaddikim. Understand? Man, it prepares the man. That's eaten ate in the midbar. Man is called Lachem Abidim. It's Ruchni Yizdika food. A pikabala, man comes from Gvuras the Atik, Pnimis Atik, weißt Tala de Bedulcha. It comes from very high Madrege. Man is Getlichkeit. Mamish Getlichkeit. It's Getlichkeit which is already Lachem Abidim. It doesn't have to be fixed b'chla. That's why the halal, the Matthias was by man, that it was Nivla by Vorim, and you didn't have to digest it b'chla. You ate man and went straight into your bloodstream, because it was already digested, because it came from Pnimis Atik, from Gvuras of Atik. But Gvuras Atik is the Lakus, it's not even Ruchni, it's the Lakus. So there has to be a process by which Gvuras of Atik should be nimshach into a gashmi, as of food, and still be Gvuras of Atik. And this was what the Shchokim did. It took the Tala, the Bedulcha, the Gvuras of Atik and Kadisha, and made them into one gashmi that should still have the properties of Gvuras of Atik, that you have no need to beat it. You just eat it. It doesn't have to be digested. You know how food works. It doesn't look at the tail, it doesn't take the head. Some food has to be prepared twice, and some food has to be prepared 3 times. Right? The first time food has to be prepared is you harvest it from the field, and it grows in the field. Then you have to grind it, and you have to prepare it. You have to make it into bread. Right? That's the whole process. Und danach darf man das essen. You have to eat it, you have to chew it, you have to digest it again. And of course the first bidur is when it grows. You plant a seed, and when it's growing out of the ground, that seed becomes chita or a pri. So you have the klipa and the pri, like you have by a baby, the shilya and the vlad. So from that seed becomes the pri itself, and the klipa, which is shemera says pri. So you have good and bad that comes from one tipa. That's the first bidur. And then when you cook it and you prepare it, there's a second bidur. And when you chew it and you digest it, it's a dritte bidur. And in each case, there's pselis, because it's the klipa. Man didn't have to be planted. It was l'leich lechem min hashamayim. It didn't have to be prepared. It didn't have to be digested. It was. If you know how man looked, you could probably drink it. It was Kizra Gad. It was tiny little pintalach, like mon. You know they have in the chalas those little black seeds, like sesame seeds. It was tiny little nakudis. Poppy seeds. Those tiny little black dots. That's what the mon was. It was white. Kizra Gad Lovan. It was tiny little seeds. You probably could have swallowed it without even gimua. You didn't have to chew it. And it was nivla be'avarim. There was absolutely no bidur whatsoever, because it was get lecha food. But it had to become gashmias, and this was done by shchokim. This is also a inyan from netzach v'hoy. You're taking a ruchni, the inyan, you're making it gashmias. Al derech moshe, k'me'ateichen chitim b'rechaim. If a person grinds wheat, now wheat taka needs a birur. But al derech moshe, when you're grinding wheat, you break up the wheat into tiny little particles, so you should be able to digest it. So the mon is the same thing. And the same is true, netzach v'heiden of nefesh ha'adam. The same is true, kach, so too. A father has to diminish a seichel. Udvar chochma, an idea of wisdom, shereitel hashpil lebnei, that he wishes to give to his son. Ulachalkom lachalokim rabim, and to break it up into tiny little pieces. To teach it him one piece at a time, with a calculation and with wisdom and knowledge and connection, so that his son should be able to get it. So you have now a second inyan in Netzach V'Heid. The first inyan in Netzach V'Heid is how to be mashpia. The second in Netzach V'Heid is how to be mitzamtzim, how to change something in being mashpia. And now comes the third inyan. And this third inyan, by the way, is usually the inyan that's discussed. The Netzach V'Heid fights a war against obstacles. V'gam, a third inyan in Netzach V'Heid, besides for the idea that it's like the kloyes and the trebein, and the idea that it's like shchokim, the third idea is in Netzach V'Heid,
the first and second.
The first one is not changing it, it's just planning how to use it. The second one is changing it. V'gam, b'chlal, b'chinas netzach, included the netzach, hu l'natzeach, v'lamed, neged kol minei hashpa, to stand against anybody who stands in the way of being mashpia. Va'alimud, and teaching, learning, b'bneifim, b'solim, b'bayis, and b'chutz, inside and the outside. And netzach fights. And you can have two types of enemies you have to fight off. First of all, mibayis, fighting off an enemy on the inside. What's the enemy on the inside? Maybe I'm wasting my time. My sons are no good, Nick. The father's own midas hagvura v'atzimtzum, she made it as dinim b'teni al b'nei. It arouses judgment against his will, against his son. Lema to say, Sheniroi lekach adayin, doesn't deserve it. So the father has to fight off his own thoughts. Maybe I shouldn't be mashpia to my son to give him anyway. And of course, chutz means other people don't want you to teach your son. Now, in this third example, hoid is missing. B'ksav yad nisham chosin. Hoid is missing. So I want to tell you a nekuda, not a arichas, but a nekuda. The nekuda's achilik between netzach and hoid is that netzach fights. That's why it's b'derech klal kav chesed. It fights. It's aggressive. You stand in the way, I'm going to fight with you. Hoid is akshonis, like hoidu la Hashem kiru v'shmei. Hoid is akshonis. Meidani, it's an akshonis. In other words, netzach fights and hoid hunkers down. And that's why hoid is in the kaf hagavura. Hoid doesn't fight. It's not aggressive, but it's just an inner strength. The third means is Yisayid. Yisayid means connection. The nekuda of Yisayid is azoi. Just like the Tiferes is the kava emtzoi, and the kava emtzoi is deeper than the other two. Yisayid is also kava emtzoi. And the nekuda of Yisayid is azoi. Midas hanetzach comes from you. Yeah? You want to do a favor to him. And he's not letting, so you fight with him. That's netzach. Midas haHoid means you want to do for him, he's not letting. So you're going to be stubborn about it. Midas haYisayid is a midah that doesn't come from you. Yisayid is not the pshat, I'm going to be strong and do what I have to do. Yisayid means I'm drawing strength from the hashpah itself. Where do I have the power to overcome obstacles? From my connection to what I want to do. Yisayid is kashrus. When you decide you want to do something, you can draw strength from the thing you wish to do to overcome all obstacles. That's called hiskashus. And Yisayid is like the Tiferes, it's the kaveh emtzoi. Al derech Moshe, for example. Hiskashus, a connection, shemakasher of sichle v'seichel b'nei, a father connects his mind to the mind of his son, b'shas limuda imo, when he's learning with him. And of course the key is ba'ahava ve'ratzon, with love and with want. Later on it uses the word cheshek, which is a great word. She'roitze, he wishes. She'yavin b'nei, that the son should understand. U'b'ladei zeh, and if not for that love, gam im haya ben shemei dibur me'el atman pi'aviv, even if the father teaches him exactly the same thing. Okay? She'medaber ba'adei v'leimed la'atzmeh, he's speaking in the presence of the son, but he's learning with himself. The son could not understand so much. Top of Kuf Chav Gimel and Aleph, please. Like now, that his father, is connecting his mind to him. If I'm learning, and you're listening to me learn, and I'm learning exactly the way I would teach you, you're not going to learn as well as when I'm teaching you. Because the hiskashus, it's a midah that creates, there's nothing changing in the words, but the emotional connection affects that you get it. And that's Yisod. She'aviv mekasher sichle elav, the father connects his intelligence with his child. U'medaber imei ponim and speaks to him face to face. Be'ava v'cheshek, with love and cheshek. Cheshek means connection. Longing. She'cheshek miyayid, he very much longs and desires. She'yaviv b'nei, that the son should understand. The measure of want and pleasure that the father gets in the hashpah, kach hashpah v'alim would go. So too will the hashpah, the lim would be greater. Shaben yuchal lekabel yesed, the son will receive more. Va'av mashpia yesed, the father is going to give more. Not because the kid is smarter, not because the father is better mashpia, but because he wants more hashpah and the son wants more hashpah. Cheshek, yisayt, his kashrus. Because of the longing and the pleasure that the father and the son have in this interaction, the mind of the son and the father are greatened and broadened. With a broader das, to teach his son more. Begashmi, it's the same way that the cheshek and the tainug affects Ribi Azera. But we know that in Kabbalah we compare it to Ziv Gashmi because there's a similarity. The Baal Shem Tov, right? The Baal Shem Tov met Arizal, Kamuv, not Begashmi. He says to the Arizal, you want to explain, say this Ateri, you give a moshel from Ziv Gishvi Isha. Find Sa'idel at a moshel. So they gave the word. Arizal took the pen and he handed it to the Baal Shem Tov. Cook, schreib du besser. You have a better moshel, schreib du besser. But But this is how it is Begashmi, this is how it is Beruchnis. The Alter Rebbe just explained the 6 midas, Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod. Notice that he forgot about Malchus. Now the Alter Rebbe didn't forget nothing, but he didn't say Malchus. This is the Shir of Tezvav.